want to do kind of a quick review slash overview of what we did on Wednesday because I know it was long. There was a lot of setup, and then just also how we can actually use these things on the front end of how we're doing this, right? So if you can go back to your project that we were working on Wednesday, some of the things that we did, we in our database folder we imported our PG promise and invoked it. We made a database variable and passed in the connection string to where our database was actually located on a machine. Right? So this allows us to interact with our database via PG promise. We exported that. We created a queries folder that contained our different queries that we wanted. So we had to require our database from that folder where we had done the PG promise connection. And then we had to get users. Our get users is a try catch block, and we created a variable here called users because we wanted to get back an array of user objects. We did that by calling our database key, our variable there, and then we talked about a few different ways to access our database with PG promise. The three main ones were any, and this was when we don't know how many things are coming back. So maybe there's 5 entries, maybe it's 1,000 entries, maybe there's 1 entry, maybe there's none, right? So any is expecting any number of things back. We had a db.1. That was something we used down here when we were trying to get our user. So we said, like, we only want 1 thing back. If we have more than 1 thing, if we have no things, this will throw an error, or at least it should, because we're expecting 1 thing. And then we also had a db.none, which I think, we did that for our delete user just as an example where we don't want anything back. We're not expecting anything back. We don't want anything back. Any questions on any of those 3 things? Okay. So other things we covered. One of the ways to get things back is to add this returning at the end of our SQL statement, where we can say what we want to be returned from the statement, like in an insert. We can insert something and ask for information back at the same time, like what did we just insert? So by doing returning star, I'm getting the entire user back. In real life, if somebody put in their password and all of this stuff, and like we converted the password into some private thing, and wanted to return the user, we probably wouldn't just say return everything, because we wouldn't want that password to ever come back into the front end. So we would probably specify what we wanted, like ID and name. Get rid of the star. And this would only return the ID and the name. So here we have control. It's like the same as a select statement, essentially. Any questions on the returning? Yeah, Shia.
In the exit ticket, there was a question that said, what's wrong with this code? And the answer was because, sorry, let me just go to it quickly. The answer was, okay, here we are. The answer was it's vulnerable to a SQL injection attack.
Okay, what was the code?
It was this.
What? Not sure why they're saying it's vulnerable. So that's a good question. So a SQL injection attack, that's like if you just accept data from the front end, but you don't sanitize the data, and I think Express does a lot of this for you already. sanitizing it, meaning like making sure it's coming in as like this string. People can sometimes write like SQL statements or JavaScript statements in forms, and then when it goes to the backend, it will get executed, and so you could mess up somebody's database if you really knew what you were doing. I don't really know how to do it that well, to be totally transparent, but that's called a SQL injection. So a SQL injection is writing SQL in a form that gets executed in the backend when it shouldn't, right? Because they're expecting your name, but instead you say, "Oh, drop all users," and then they don't have a database anymore. But that shouldn't really be an issue in our things, but that does exist. Okay. Any questions on the returning? No. Okay. So the other important thing that we went over, and this is all PG Promise related, was that we talked about how to pass information into our SQL query here. So if we wanted to pass like the params, like our db dot whatever, can take in more than one argument. So it would take in the SQL statement, and then it takes in the actual data or something. So if it says $1, then it's taking from the very first element in the array. If the next thing that's a variable occurs, that would say $2, and that would then take from the second thing in the array. So it just fills that in for you. If it's just one thing, you actually don't need to put it in an array. You could just pass exactly the variable that you want to be added into that sentence or statement. When dealing with objects, this request body looks like a array. Looks like an object that looks like this. Like we could say name, Corey, age pointing to 100, let's say. And so when we say insert into user's name, age, values, we can say $, and then from that object take the name, whatever the value is on the name key. So we'd take Corey, and then take the whatever value at the age key, which would be 100 in this case. And that will just put it in. But because I was passing that in as the request body, I'm just using that as the entire object. But I could specify and change this object if I wanted. Here, I'll just... Questions on that? Right, so those are all the ways of passing data into these SQL statements with PG Promise. Right, the other highlight was that PG Promise returns a promise, right? It's in the name. And so with that, we're dealing with promises. So async await is what's the current most thing. You could also be chaining with like .then and .catch and stuff if you weren't using async await. But you should use async await now. That's what's being used. Just don't be startled if you see a .then on an old project by someone else, like me, if you go through my projects. Because I was writing it before. No, why would I go back and refactor working code? Also, I don't care that much about the projects. They're just like what I was using to teach. So, okay. So we also did a small review on the routes. So let's say we have our pets routes. We would create the pets router. We would also, this is called object destructuring. This is how we can get this function out of what our module.exports is and our pets queries. And so then we say, hey, whenever there's anything that's already /pets, because we're in the pets router. So when it's just plain slash, go ahead and get pets. Right? For users, we set it up the same way, where we with object destructuring, we took out all of these functions so that we can just use them right away. Some older way that you might be seeing things is like they would call this DB or something, and then they would have to be like DB dot user pets router, because that comes in as an object when you're requiring. Right, your module.exports is exporting this object, and so when you're importing it, you're getting back this object. So then they'd have to key into this object at the functions that they want. But this is a little bit cleaner. Yeah. This pets router was a nested route. So we said use pets router if they go to pets user/id/pets. With that, the only difference was that when we made our router, we said merge params true. That way we have access to all of the params from the parent within the route. And then our app.js file has our middleware there where we're saying if anything /users, we're going to use the users router. If it's /pets, we're going to use the pets router. All right, that was essentially our entire app. There's a lot more files, but that's okay. It's just something. It's just an adjustment. Any questions on that? Right, those were things we did. Okay, so yeah, I mentioned like that we control the way the data looks. So like right now, if we go to Postman and I want to just see users at 1, right? This was a route we made for get 1 user, and we get this user Corey, right? But maybe I also want to have an array of Corey's pets in there. So I could do that with a kind of a fancy SQL statement that uses something called array aggregate or array ag, right? But I could also change the code in my query. So if I really wanted to, we'll go to queries, users, and when we're getting a user where a request is on this, right? So I could do that, and then I could also say like let my pets be, and I could await, and I could say db.any select star from pets where owner.id is equal to same thing as the other one, right? So I could pass in request params.id. And if I do that, now I have all of my pets that belong to this user. Right, so this is an object that we've made. This is the user object. So now in here, I could even say like user.pets is equal to pets. So I'm giving a new key on my user's object. And just by making this change, right, it's like one line of change, we can go over to our Postman, and if we search for Corey now, ooh, we get an error. Must have misspelled something.
Owner. It's owner's ID.
It's actually owner's ID underscore, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so small error, no big deal. Jesus. Let's see. What was it? Select star from pets. Or isn't it just owner ID? Do we know? What was my pet's query? I already did it here. Owner ID. Okay. Owner ID. This will work. Maybe. Nope. Says users is not defined. Yes, because I said user, right? So it's really normal to write bugs, right? As you can see. So don't worry if you're making them. You have to know that eventually you'll be able to debug them, right? But with making that one change, right now this is the data I'm sending back with my user, and that's okay, right? Maybe I'd rather do this than have that route that says user/ID/pets. Maybe I just think when I get a user, then I should also get their pets because then I have the better whole picture of my user, right? It's not that either way is wrong. It's just that it's your personal choice what you want to happen. Does that make sense? So now we have this nice user object. So again, the only change was that I made another request to our database to get the pets, and then I just added that as a key onto my user object. No problem. Okay. So let's try the next thing, I guess, which is I want us to see how this relates to the front end. So I probably should have put all of this in a backend file, but that's okay. I didn't. So let's make a folder called front end.
It's a file.
Thank you. Let's make a folder called front end. And inside of our front end, let's make an index.html, and we'll make an index.js. And now your task will be to, let's see, I just want to use the routes we already have. So why don't you have a form on your HTML page? So make a form that allows us to create new users. Whoops. Have a button. And then we'll just say or have a list that always shows all the names of the users. Okay, so let's spend a little bit of time doing this just so we can get used to this idea and see that the data from the front end, we're sending it back and we're getting back the responses that we're going to be adding and showing. Okay? Any questions on the expectation? All right, so let's do this for about 15 to 20 minutes. Then we'll go over it, and then we'll just work on our labs today, and then our project if we finish the lab.
Oh, because it would be under that user would say.
Yeah. HTML.
Yeah.
Type in HTML.
Okay.
HTML5.
Okay.
There you go. Is this mine?
I think so.
Thank you. I think so too. Surprised it didn't get taken. Yes. Add, delete. Yeah. Yeah, that's what it's talking about. Just ignore it. Because you're going to control it. Otherwise, yeah.
If I don't ignore it, then I'll put like get
Your form's probably a post.
post. What I'm saying is, if it's a post,
Yeah, I think they're asking for like the like the accent.
really.
I don't know about. I thought this kind of a online. Don't. But
Yeah.
I'm sure we do a little Google. Same as me.
Maybe we should listen to the phone. Yeah. Let's make the phone then.
Coffee's coffee, bro. Nah, okay. Coffee here is coffee. Okay. Take it back. Take it back.
Just listen to the local host that does the podcast.
And then you can create a second browser as well.
So local host 1000 / user.
The whole school.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Look at one user. That is just a private file. I don't know what the difference is. Which is what? Same. And this is so you said a flaw. Before the active, before and then maybe to first like the pound and so that way
Something. I just want to make sure all the other stuff. So everything I have performed to you. Functions. Comments.
You could also like not actually change the link address when they click on text. The JavaScript file everything on the screen. That's the function of the technology.
So I was just making sure like my friend.
Okay. Yeah, you don't have to create it, but I could just write the function right and then I can call that.
Oh yeah, right in here.
Yeah, you don't have to declare it.
Oh, I don't have to declare.
Well, you're already in an anonymous function that fires, so
So I don't have to declare. Oh, really? So I don't have to just create a user.
you can just go make it. Yeah. So just do it as if it's the same as on the so you have to find out what's going on.
That's the list of reasons.
Just have to call that off.
You know why? For select ID. When you put the ID in the bottom line. Okay, so right now with your yeah, okay. So I just take it down. And yeah, when you go let your now we go to Axial host the local 8,000, local host 8,000, add new users, and you want to put information and listing inside your now you have the file right. Now how do you pass that to the backend? Yes.
That's what
How
I'm
you
saying.
want to use it?
That's what I
Do what they say. You want to check your basic performance. You choose this. Let's get fair users. This is good. No problem. They can fair user. You know the thing you follow the
Yeah. Yeah.
you can have that.
Yeah. Great.
Here, you can test that on the stream. You can test
That makes sense. I was just like, yeah.
Say I put the name of the agent, hit submit, and when I hit user, it's supposed to take me to the user's page with that. Create user, let's say, so what, so we can just, what's the beat, just because they don't Well, if it uses up the okay, body, that's the body. And yeah.
What?
Yeah, it gets crazy. I looked at it.
It's getting crazy.
Well, technically, right. That's what you were telling me. You were telling me don't do it, but then it comes out with async.
You can write async ahead of that. Ahead of that synonymous.
Okay, so I have the way Axios.post.
Stop the recording. It's like so much dead time and wasting memory.